happy to be here and hosting this panel on a transatlantic theme. We're going to be addressing the role that America can play in helping the best French founders having this global ambition scale in the US, not just in the US. So maybe just a bit of context, and we've had some interesting thoughts on where the venture capital market is standing right now. 2023 is a very difficult year and will continue to be a difficult year. Just some stats. The numbers are bad, very bad. We're in this quarter, Q3 2023, marks the lowest level in 6 years in terms of deal value, the lowest level in 3 years in terms of deal count, so figures are not good. Many turbulences on the markets. There's some positive factors. Of course, Gen AI is one of them. Ever heard of Gen AI? I think now. Geopolitics has erupted as a major theme for VC, so a lot to think about and a lot of disruption in the context. So I'm very honored to present our panelists, 2 investors, 2 entrepreneurs, 2 great companies. Entrepreneurs first. Pierre-Damien, you're the CEO and co-founder of Loft Orbital. You operate in space tech, so you offer space as a service and you help customers access orbits in a nice way. So what is to say about your company is that you're actually a US company based in SF. You're a French founder, but a US company. And we have Bertin from Quantum Surgical, from my hometown in Montpellier, so congratulations to you. You operate a medtech company. You arrived in the US with the FDA approval in 2022 and launched the first operation in the US in May 2023, so this year, with the first live operation of a live tumor using your robot. So amazing job and congratulations for this. And on the investor side, we have Sini from Partech, global venture investor, and Cohen from Anderson Horowitz, who is not to be presented. So happy to start this panel. And maybe to start with, why is America still very attractive for French founders, and not French scale-ups, French founders having this global ambition? Maybe we can start by the easy facts and look at the market. How is the US still a key market for you guys?
Yeah, I can take that one. So just maybe a few words for those of you, which is I'm sure pretty much everybody who don't know Loft Orbital. We're a space infrastructure company. So our mission is to let customers deploy their mission in space. Their missions can be either hardware or software. So customers are typically NASA giving us an infrared camera to monitor the climate or the wildfires for early detection, or Microsoft giving us a piece of AI software to run on the satellite where they can have real-time autonomous decision-making from insights that they gain from satellites. We essentially are at the same stage and very similar to what the cloud industry was 15 years ago, in that we expose to customers not only compute on the satellite, but compute, connectivity, and sensing. Sensing meaning different cameras, radios, and things like that. So from a structure standpoint, we're a US company. We have subsidiary actually both in the US and in France. We're in France for being able to access the market, but really also the talents. And when it comes to software, developers tool, developers infrastructure, France is actually uniquely capable in terms of talents, right? And in the US, this is really more about the market. We have a subsidiary in the US that we call Loft Federal that allows us to do business with the US government for classified work. So secret, top secret, SAP, SCI work, even though we are an international company, French founder, French CEO, and actually investors from all over the globe in Middle East, Southeast Asia, and Europe as well. I think the reason why the US is so attractive for us is quite frankly, the market, right? The market for Loft is really driven by 2 things. One is the need for decarbonation, climate monitoring, and the other one is, as you had mentioned, the growing need for sovereign constellations of satellites for defense. I think the Ukraine war showed that this was more and more important. And of course, there is no bigger customer in this market than the US defense, both in the intelligence community and the Space Force community, where it's basically $100 billion market just for that customer. It's pretty big. So when you look at what happened over the past few years, where probably over the past 18 months, the needs to deploy more and more AI, to build more and more tools to let AI being deployed on infrastructure extended in space, for those two needs, that's really what drives the market. And on those two sides, the US market is the biggest, US defense, US climate activities.
Thanks. And Bertin, is it the same thing for you? Is the US market your core market today or not yet?
Yes, of course. So maybe a few words to explain, what I'm doing. So I'm in the field of medical robotics. So our technology called Epion is actually used to help physicians treating patients suffering from cancer, mainly abdominal tumors and also lung tumors. So basically, we help the physician, executing a minimally invasive treatment that enables the patient to be treated, on an outpatient basis. I am, I guess, what we call a serial entrepreneur in surgical robotics because I have already, designed and sold technologies in the past in different fields of surgery, in orthopedic, brain, spine. And the reason why the US market is so important for us is because, as already knows, the medical device, in the field of medical device, the US is the #1 market in the world. Mm-hmm. So for a company active in medical device, it is very difficult not to have a presence in the US. So in a very similar fashion as what I did in one of my previous companies before I sold it to Zimmer Biomet, I decided at some stage to come when we created our subsidiary in the US. So I just come for maybe 2 years, 3 years, just for all the startup activities to make sure that everything is in place, the teams, all the execution. And when everything is okay, then I can go back to Montpellier, which is my hometown, where we have a team of around 100 plus, people, engineering, regulatory, manufacturing. And yes, for us, obviously, the US market is a key market.
Thanks. And maybe before we leave it on to investors, maybe one question. So for you, Jean and Zach, how is the US really attractive in terms of financing? Is it core for French entrepreneurs? And why are you attracted by backing these top French founders?
You asked earlier if this market was still attractive for French founders scaling up their companies. I think more than still attractive, I think it's more so than ever. It's a bit of a why now moment for this. Certainly from my perspective at Partech, we very much favor that motion where you're arbitraging in some ways the two concepts that you guys have been mentioning, right? The market and the labor market, the talent market. Particularly because the going certainly has gotten rough the past few years, right? It's no longer a tide rising environment. Mm-hmm. There's massive dispersion around like who's doing well, who's not doing well. Those companies that are built on really solid technology and strong talent are going to pull ahead. And we see a lot of that motion tactically, I would say, facilitated in some strange way by COVID, where everyone had to learn in a hurry to work remotely. So that broke that last sort of barrier where suddenly you're like, well, can I work from New York, from San Francisco, and have an engineering team in Paris or anywhere else in France? That became obvious to everyone. And so I think culture is shifting toward being much more aggressive and moving to the US early to grow a market, to grow market share here. Right? So that motion certainly to us is one that we look for in founders and that we encourage and we try to accompany as well, right? And then to answer your question on like, from a funding standpoint, for all these reasons, right? Obviously.
Of course.
Yeah, I'm happy to give our opinion, and I think it starts from the fact that like I mostly look at consumer products, and mostly US founders are indoctrinated into this like skeuomorphic behavior of what a social experience or a consumer subscription company should look like, and you get a lot of products that look very similar, whether it's a scroll-based feed or likes and comments, all of these environments that we're very familiar of. But when you go kind of across the pond and you look at kind of French founders, Parisian founders, you see this kind of complete kind of ambition and almost sense of arrogance in a really good way, where they want to build products with a kind of net new behaviors and net new environments. And you get amazing new forms of engagement and entertainment. Like if you think about like Be Real, right? Like this is kind of anti-social social media, which would have never come out from the US from someone spinning out of Facebook or Instagram or of those products. So I think when you look at trying to invest in the early stages and kind of big vision, you want to have founders who are kind of pushing the boundaries and are not indoctrinated. And I think French founders have that. And then the second is the ability to build product intention around that vision. So whether it's these like little nuanced products, and I think Be Real does this as well, of like a 1 second delay between the front and back camera picture. People might think that that's a technical problem, but actually they're trying to create more spontaneity, less control of the users, thus making it more authentic. And the second thing is like the sense of arrogance I spoke about is like their ability to go after kind of like untouchable categories that US founders tend to think, whether it's like email or browser, and these are categories that have tons of consumer engagement, tons of consumer spend, tons of consumer value. And these are the, especially with the rise of generative AI, like we think these are all going to be like net new AI native businesses. And with the kind of product design, the lack of kind of skeuomorphic indoctrination, you have this kind of rise of like really exciting kind of French consumer products that get us really excited as a firm.
So thanks for your perspective. So I understand that there's a huge market in the US. Financing is here, that you guys love French founders with global ambition, so that's good. Now let's look at this from the other side and understand the hurdles that exist. Given the current context that is, again, a difficult one, there are a lot of accusations on behalf of US investors saying, well, now no one is here to finance French startups anymore because the environment is more difficult and you prefer to invest in US companies which are more secure on certain points. So is this true from your experience and from your experience as entrepreneurs? Can we start by this?
Yeah, for me? Okay. So first of all, I think it's maybe important to separate, the financial side from the business side, which is, I think, two things different. For example, our company, we are active in the US. In my previous company, we were actually acquired by a company in the US, and we had no US, financial. So that's two things which are different. When it comes to the hurdles that we are facing as a company, we want to, start, a new business in the US. Is first of all the people. That's the reason why this is what I said and I did in my previous experiences. Is I think that it is very important for the actual, CEOs, all the people, the founders, or the key people from the company to be very involved, basically, on the activities in the US, because that's a totally different world. The mentality is different, the philosophy is different. And you have to make sure that basically whatever is your vision, whatever is your understanding of how the market is going to be deployed, this is being executed exactly the way you were expecting. So I think that the very first major difficulty you are facing is the people. Then obviously we can talk about financial, but again, today I think we are in a very international world, and you can find financial almost anywhere.
But do you not think that in this particular context, and maybe Zach, we can have your perspective on this one, but are you finding that French founders are adapting as US founders are, or that there may be more difficulties?
Yeah, I'm happy to take it. I think to your first question, like we're not shying away from investing across EU, UK. We just opened an office in London, and I'm going to Paris in 2 weeks to meet a bunch of founders. And I think we're like, as a early stage investor, your horizons are so long to take kind of short-term risk and think about macro rates is just short-sighted at this point. And I think from a French founder perspective, the one thing that we kind of are starting to see an improvement on, but has historically been really hard, is that the French founder's been really, really good at building like $1 billion product and like sitting in their office, thinking about product design, building a product that has a ton of natural engagement and is organic. But that's $1 billion product on paper. How do you turn that into kind of $1 billion business with like dollar weight to it? And I think the hard part of that is like turning it into monetization, turning this into like what flows through a P&L, how do you raise a large growth round? And I think that these are all still newer territories for these founders. So I think it's getting better and it's improved year over year, and that will have a compounding effect. But for now, it's still fairly nascent.
Thanks. Jean?
A very similar observation. I think it's undeniable that 2023, just like 2022, has not been an easy climate to raise capital in for founders. You're seeing that the general behavior on the part of the investing community is definitely risk-off. I don't get the sense that that means we're not going to fund French founders or European founders. I think it's more a matter of like a lot more scrutiny. Maybe for the first half of the year, with the exception of AI, where suddenly, you know, if you and I showed up with a deck, we could probably raise a round. I think, thankfully, that level of exuberance has died off a little bit, and people are asking smarter questions, at least. So I think with credible founders, there's capital available. We certainly are very much like open for business and looking to back those founders. And then to Zach's point, I think it takes time for this ecosystem to gain in texture and for this sort of, you know, what you need in order to win, not just as an idea or as a product, but as a business to permeate the system, right? And one thing that actually I find myself being very optimistic about is that we've been at this for so long now that you're starting to see, for instance, French founders who are coming back from, quote, a tour of duty in the US where they actually spent like 10 years building a company, you know, sort of imbibing and ingesting the ways of the Bay Area, let's say, right? And then they want to play to this arbitrage we were talking about earlier, particularly because AI is so math and CS heavy that suddenly the French, who are always a little bit too abstract and philosophical, have their moment in the sun, right? In the spotlight. They're like, yes, we've been studying for this our whole life, right? And so marrying, you know, their great like technical and CS chops and math chops with, again, a more seasoned cultural acquaintance with what it takes to build engagement and to grow the business, I think that makes for incredible DNA in companies, and so we're very positive about all this.
And that's actually an excellent transition, because talking about like what French founders are capable of doing, you know that there's a 300 million round that is announced on Mistral AI, which is a top company within the Gen AI space. And this gives a good transition, because two of our founders on this panel, you two actually, are representing deep tech, as we can say. And do you think that there are specificities in deep tech as being maybe more easy or perhaps more difficult in relation to sovereignty issues in being a US, like in succeeding in the US? I don't know if there's any specificities you would like to talk about on being a deep tech company succeeding in the US.
Yeah, I think, first of all, I would completely agree with what Jean was saying, which is in France, like the talent is extremely strong in like theoretical math and CS, and that's exactly what like the AI world needs. So right now that's in high demand. For us, I mean, for better or for worse, like, as a space company, we're not a consumer business, right? So the market actually grows higher and faster in times of uncertainty, right? War in Ukraine, uncertainty in the Middle East. Now every single government wants their own constellation of satellites. Climate change becomes real. Every government wants to make a move and have like a way to monitor climate response to environment disaster like wildfires and floodings from space. COVID happens. Every government, every company, but every large company now wants to have a way to monitor their supply chain in real time, right? All those are like driver of the market for space. So for us, we didn't quite see the same like contraction in 2022, 2023. It's actually quite the opposite. And from a funding standpoint as well, we're seeing, like for us, like a lot of the market is driven by like large deal size. Like a typical customer for us would spend $100 million in our services. And so usually there is value in having anchored investors. So interestingly, even when we go to like funding a round, we usually are already oversubscribed from investors that are strategic, like typically sovereign wealth fund or very strategic investors that do not lead. So we're writing like smaller check, but we do have that like balance between the commercial and the funding rounds. So those two things for us come together. So when it comes to how France and the US can work together, for us, it's very similar to what you're saying, and I think similar to what everybody's saying. Like, you have huge talent in France. We're also having, and I know we're hearing just after this from Benoit, I think from Vercors, the French government actually has done a lot for supporting startup, especially startup from like the 40 or 120 startup that they really support. They have the France 2030 vision with $50 billion of funding over the next few years supporting those kind of startups. So for us, we see the market also growing there, but we're primarily there for talent and primarily in the US for market.
Yeah, I'm sure there will be there will be perhaps like diverse paths between more enterprise startups, deep tech startups, consumer startups, and let's see where this goes. Well, I think we're running out of time, so thank you everyone for this panel. It was great having this discussion, and have a great day, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.